Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Good morning. This is Darrin T. Mish, your host, the IRS Solution Attorney.
Who are you guys?
I know. He's letting the cat out of the bag.
I have strangers in the studio this morning. They had to get to know you guys all over again.
So the backstory behind what Pat George is talking about is, you know, it's summertime. So, and I also go to San Diego quarterly, which is ironically where Darren's from. And so I had my business trip combined with vacation. So we pre-recorded a couple shows.
We did. We even pre-recorded some of those shows in a different studio, in a different county.
Isn't that funny?
And
yes.
I had to stay here to play them and monitor the phone calls, and so I got no summer vacation.
And so the board just blew up, right,
so
on those recorded calls.
When do I get to go on my vacation?
Whenever you want, Pat. I'm sure Roxanne will fill in for you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Speaking of which, if you have a question and you want to ask a tax problem-related question, give us a call at 888-404-1010. That's 888-404-1010. Because
we are live in the studio today and we can take those calls.
I have questions.
There's no way we would let this poor of an intro actually, air if it wasn't live.
That's right. That is right, because we would have already cut that out. So today's topic is what to do if you get a letter from the IRS. And by the way, Mr. Darrin Mish is your host, and I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell.
Absolutely.
Pat George hopped right in there.
So I've been thinking about this topic on the way over. You have to drive over several bridges and whatnot, and I was thinking, I want to say, well, if you get a letter from the IRS, well, of course you just ignore it. You throw it in the trash, right? I mean, isn't that what most people do?
Not a good answer, Darrin.
Okay, you're right. That is not, in fact, the answer. You're not supposed to just, well, what I see a lot is I see people come in with stacks of unopened IRS correspondence that covers periods of years, typically. And the interesting thing is, since I deal with tax problems on a regular basis, I can tell what's pretty much in the envelope by what the face of the envelope looks like. But that's not what you should do. You should not just let them stack up and refuse to open them. I think the first thing that you need to do is, don't panic, because not every piece of correspondence from the IRS is a catastrophe.
Be calm and carry on.
Well, there have been rare occasions, not common, but there have been rare occasions where I might even get a tax refund. So when you see that envelope from the IRS, I know what those look like too. You should go ahead and open those.
Have people brought in a stack of mail and they're like, ew, this is from the IRS. I don't want to open it. And there's actually a check in there. Has that happened?
I've seen it happen. But there's something about those three little letters, IRS, that really scare us as Americans. And I think it's a little bit sad.
It's like, I run sideways.
Or something like that. Anyway, so when we see those initials or that acronym or Internal Revenue Service on an envelope, it's pretty common for people to have, their heart starts to race and they have that lump in their stomach and it scares them. So first thing is, don't panic. You just need to open the letter and see what it's about, because sometimes it's really no big deal. Sometimes it's like, well, we took your refund for 2015, for example, and we applied it to a balance that you were on an installment agreement. And
the cool thing is too, doing the show for as long as we produce a lot of content, and a lot of that content is on your website.
Absolutely, at getirshelp.com.
And so I think a lot of people might be able to answer even some of their own questions. If they just open the letter and they see what the notice is, there's probably something on your site that will tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah, pretty much every letter has a notice number or a letter number in the upper right-hand corner. And I've worked really hard to go ahead and do videos and whatnot about every single kind of letter that you can get from the IRS. So Pat George is... I
think he's trying to tell us that you're also on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm also on Facebook. You can friend me at Darrin T. Mish. That's actually my personal Facebook page. Or we just started a new Facebook fan-type page, which is called the IRS Solution Attorney Show. And we'll be posting... I
can always tell when Pat George has something to say.
We'll be posting more and more content there.
I'm reliving his vacation.
Oh, I see.
So should I share with everybody what my idea of a vacation is? Okay, so we actually have a fifth wheel RV. And apparently, when I took my wedding vows with my wife, about
I hope Heather is not listening.
I was going to say about how many years. Now I want to say exactly how many years. Now I'm going to get it right. 16 years ago, apparently, I promised to go to the Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri, every single year because there's a family lake house there, and we all get together every summer. So, very adventurously, we drove, and we've done this many years in a row. Drove to Missouri from Florida, and
how long is that anyway? That's a long drive.
It's about a 20 to 24-hour drive, but we stop along the way and whatnot and have a good time. We usually stop and do some things on the way, and sometimes, most years, in fact, we will tack on some kind of really cool family adventure on the back end. So in the past, we've gone to Yellowstone, we've gone to Grand Teton, we've gone to Mount Rushmore.
That's the way to do it. Like, stop along the way, enjoy some stuff, and then, get to your destination versus trying to hurry up and get there.
So on one epic trip, we were way out west. We're in Wyoming at Grand Teton, and we started talking about how long it was going to take to get back home. And I punch in, our home address in the GPS, and it says like 3.5 days of continuous driving. I was like, well, okay, I don't think we're going to do that all at one setting. So actually what we did is we went down to Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico because I always wanted to go there when I was a kid. And then we spent like 3 days driving across Texas.
What made you want to go there? Like, what's there? How was it?
Carlsbad Caverns?
Yeah.
Oh, it's really neat. It's this giant hole in the ground that goes down hundreds of feet. And actually, you can take an elevator, but what we did is we walked all the way down. And I want to say it's a couple miles.
Wow.
And it's, there's stalactites and stalagmites, and I don't know the difference really.
Yeah. One goes up, one goes down.
Exactly. And we had a great time. So I think it's a really good place to be one of my kids, honestly, because they get to go and see and do things that I never got to do, which I think is really what it's all about.
What was your favorite part of your trip?
This trip?
Yeah.
Coming back.
Arriving home? Yeah, arriving home safely, I think, was probably the best part of the trip this year.
There's crazy people on the road. We were talking about that, like how you almost got hit head on several times.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who are really impatient, and there's something about hauling a trailer, and we all do it when we're not hauling a trailer, is we got to get around that guy, and we do it to semi-drivers all the time. I think that semi-truck drivers are probably saints, basically. Because I don't know how they don't lose their temper and just smash people. And you do hear about that on occasion. But,
which they're certainly bigger and they could, but highly not encouraged. So, again, our studio call-in number is 888-404-1010, and Pat George is trying to mess up Darrin there, flipping through all the photos.
Okay, so just so
but our topic for the show.
I see you made a stop at the fireworks outlet.
So, what Pat George is doing, just to give you a picture since we're on radio.
I wish we had video. We should be videoing.
There's a monitor right next to my face, and he's supposed to use it to send me messages about when the breaks are and things like that. But what he's doing is he's flipping through all the pictures on my Facebook feed, and I'm kind of a character on Facebook. I'm kind of a character in real life, but and he's doing it and it's really distracting me. So I just turned the monitor
Pat George
off.
Does it every show to me, like intentionally, just to try to mess me up.
I knew you were a cowboy, but I didn't know your wife was a cowboy too.
Cowgirl, get it right.
Something about it means something when your woman takes your cowboy hat, I think.
Oh man.
Yeah, moving right along. Anyway, back to the IRS notices.
You get a letter from the IRS. Don't panic.
Typically an IRS notice is going to be about your federal tax return or your accounts or balances that you owe. It's going to be about a specific issue, such as, changes that they're proposing to make to your account. Sometimes it may ask you for additional information. Sometimes, you might have taken a position on your tax return and they just want some documentation, some proof. I'll give you a real common example is, a lot of times people, specifically in divorce situations, they want to claim their children, which I think is, obviously they're right. But sometimes the IRS will ask for documentation that the child was in the home for more than, 50% of the time. Happens a lot when they're stepchildren, different last names and non-biological children, that kind of thing. And the IRS is pretty hard on people in proving, they want documentary proof that the kid was in the household for more than, 50% of the year.
With that being said, I've seen a lot of times where, at least this is what I've seen from the side that we work in, which is real estate. You'll have like a husband and wife that are separate or split, and then they're fighting over who's going to file to get the child. And then, so what I've always heard is the first one to file gets the write-off. And sometimes, the child may be with the mom most of that time, and the dad's filing first.
Yeah, those things are supposed to be handled, in the divorce decree, but people don't always follow that, and the IRS certainly does not go by what the divorce decree says. The IRS just basically treats it like a race. Whoever claims the child first wins.
Which is insanity, but...
And not super fair.
They just, they just want it done. They don't want to make it their fight, I guess. So you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Today's topic is what to do if you get a letter from the IRS. And if you have actually gotten a letter from the IRS and you have a question on it, you can call us. We're 888-404-1010. Lock that number in your phone, 888-404-1010. We'll be back in a minute.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Apparently today the theme of the show is my vacation. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, I was gone too, so we can't just chap on you.
I think it's really just Pat's jealous that he didn't get to go on vacation.
That's a start.
We usually do fun stuff like every vacation, but this time we just slept. Literally slept pretty much the whole time.
Well, that might be a sign that
Slept
maybe you're pushing just a little bit too hard.
Watch movies, played Tetris.
Now everyone's playing Pokemon on the go.
I know.
I don't even want to.
I've been trying to figure that out. Every time I try to read the articles on it, I get sidetracked, but
Did you download it on your phone yet?
no.
Don't.
Yeah.
It takes over everything you do on your phone. It monitors everything. It
Does it
doesn't
really?
just not pictures, and it does everything. Whatever you look at, it monitors everything. That's the bad thing about it. That's why
It's obviously a government plot.
Yes.
Obviously.
I know. I've heard some different real estate people are talking about it because I guess they have to, I don't really understand it, but you have to go to different places to get the card. Like it's a modern day version of the old trading card.
Yeah, they have one. You have to go to Minnesota.
Whatever.
Sponsored by the Minnesota
Okay,
Chamber
if
of
your
Commerce.
kid is playing Pokemon or you know anything about this, please call in and enlighten us because we clearly do not know.
There's already a lawyer that I've seen online that is advertising. If you've been hurt as a result of somebody playing Pokemon, give me a call. Which I think is kind of interesting because it's going to happen, right? Because from what I understand, they've got their head down even more often than usual.
This morning in the news ran into a tree.
And
Doing Pokemon stuff or just in general?
Doing Pokemon stuff, yeah. Oh, yeah, he said I was doing Pokemon.
and I just wonder, this is not my area of expertise by any stretch, negligence, but...
Do your kids play that? Are they familiar with that?
No. They're actually gone right now. I hope they're not playing it.
This is your opportunity. You're pretty much an entrepreneur. You could introduce an IRS game.
I could, in fact. The problem is it would probably have to be rated, for violence, because that's what people would actually want. No, I'm not advocating violence by any stretch of the imagination. That was just a joke.
Oh, man. We'd like to have a little bit of fun in between, but, we do bring some seriousness to the show. And so today's topic is what to do if you get a letter from the IRS.
So we went over, a couple things real quick. I'll just recap those. Don't panic. Don't freak out. Just because you got a letter from the IRS does not mean that it's necessarily bad. Quite often there's just administrative notices. It's just put you on notice. Okay.
There might be a refund in there. You won't know unless you open it.
There could be a refund in there. The second thing is, it's usually about a specific issue, and it's just going to tell you what that issue is and what changes they might be proposing to your account. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference. So you want to go ahead and open it. The next thing is, you may get a notice that the IRS or that indicates that the IRS has made a change or a correction to your tax return. Sometimes that means you owe more. Sometimes it means you owe less. Sometimes it means you don't have any difference at all. So you just want to review that information and compare it to your original return. Mistakes are actually pretty common on tax returns, and the good thing is it's one of those things where most mistakes can be fixed. There's very few mistakes that can.
What happens if you owe less? Do they actually include a refund or what?
If you don't have any outstanding balances, for sure, they would actually generate a refund check.
There, another example of a check in the mail.
I think we have a call from...
I believe we do, from Alice. Hold on, let's get her on the line. Hi, Alice. Welcome to the show. Do we have you?
Push it right on the left-hand side.
There she
I think
is.
we got her now.
Okay, there's something going on. Can't hear her.
Alice, hold on one second. Hold on. Okay, you there? Alice? Okay, let's try this again. Go ahead. We didn't hear you because somehow there was a little snafu on the phone.
Well, there's been people being robbed playing Pokemon.
Oh,
Pat,
yeah.
is she coming through the air or is she only in here? She is. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I saw some news reports of people being robbed while playing Pokemon because they're
And
not.
also, there was a young man that got stabbed while playing Pokemon.
Was this locally?
Yes, right there in Tampa.
Alrighty then.
I think the moral of the story is be aware of your surroundings. You do not actually fully go into fantasy
So
land.
what's the idea behind the game, Alice? Do you know anything about it?
All I know is what my granddaughters have told me. They're getting these little these creatures that you can save up, and they change into whatever.
Huh.
And the goal of the game is to collect to collect the cards, get more points, and then go up to different levels. Is that right?
Yes.
I did see a pizza place today, or I saw it on Facebook, that a pizza place actually has specials. They'll actually, if you reach the highest level on Pokemon Go, they'll actually give you a free pizza. So I mean, it's one of these, cultural crazes that we go through in the United States every so often, where it's just going to be a really big deal for a while, and then it's going to probably kind of fade off.
Yeah, but what I'm curious about this one, because there's some things that stay a big deal for a while. There's some stuff that's like hype real quick and then it goes away real quick, and I'm wondering if this is not one of those things.
Well, we'll have to wait and see, huh?
Well, thank you for chiming in, Alice. If you're playing the Pokemon game or you know someone that is, make sure you pay attention and stay safe. Thanks for your call.
So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is every IRS notice that you get is going to have specific instructions. So in other words, if there's something you need to do, it's going to tell you specifically what it is you need to do. It never ceases to amaze me how many people actually will get an IRS notice, and the fear and anxiety that grips them so intensely that they can't read anymore. It's not like the notices were particularly difficult to comprehend. It's just something to do with the anxiety that's wrapped around the fear of dealing with the IRS that causes people to just be paralyzed. So my advice would be just try to take deep breaths and read it, and it might not be a big deal.
One of the things that you put on here for tip number 6, if you don't agree with the notice, it's important for you to respond. And that's kind of a loaded question, because I would think most people don't really know exactly how to respond.
Exactly. So there's a notice that comes out called a CP2000. It's a CP2000. And what that is, it's a proposal from the IRS to typically increase your tax liability, most often because you have neglected to put the income from a 1099 or something like that on your tax return. And before the IRS can assess that tax, assess is just a fancy word that means add the tax to your tax bill. Before they can assess the tax, they have to give you an opportunity to respond. And so if you get a CP2000, one of the first things that you want to do is obviously take it to a professional such as myself if you don't want to handle it yourself. But if you think you can handle it yourself because it's relatively minor or whatnot, you're going to want to look for the deadline on the notice, and you're going to want to make sure that you reply to the IRS's CP2000 before that deadline elapses. And you've heard this many times on the show. You don't want to just go ahead and put a regular first class stamp on that envelope and mail it in, because it's just about guaranteed to be, quote, lost if you do that.
What does the correspondence need to actually look like? Like, can this be just a handwritten letter
Well,
that goes to the IRS, or does it need to be typed up in some type of formal?
In the course of that, on the CP2000, there is a place to go ahead and respond, typically.
Also on the letter.
Yeah, on the letter itself. It has some lines and whatnot. And I would say that if there is more, correspondence that's necessary, I would encourage you to type it up so that it's easy to read. The biggest problem I think that pro se taxpayers have, that's taxpayers who are not represented by counsel, is that when you handwrite something, it's more difficult to read, and something gets lost in the translation because people are lazy. People just don't want to read things that are difficult to read. And so I think that typing up a response is always the best idea.
The other thing I was thinking too is most of the time I would imagine that most people don't agree with any notice that they get from the IRS, right? Like the number's always going to be off, or they don't think they owe the money.
If I got a big refund coming, I agree with the IRS.
Wow.
For sure.
How many more times than not, it's not a refund.
No, I actually disagree with you, Katrina, because there's a lot of times when you might get a CP2000 and it's about a 1099 that you forgot. And what's there to disagree about with that? Let's say you're an independent contractor and you work for 2 different places, and you only put the income from one 1099 on there, and the other one was like, I don't know, say $3,000 or $5,000, something like that, and you just forgot. That happens. Innocent mistakes happen. But when you look at that, I mean, how are you gonna argue that? It's like, oh yeah, you're right. But in that example, let's say it was a $5,000 1099 that you forgot about. Well, there might be corresponding expense deductions that go along with that as well.
But you have to refile the return, right, or edit it, or You
would want to amend the return at that point.
That's what I was thinking.
So on the CP 2000, if you straight up agree, there's a place to sign. If you straight up disagree, there's a place to sign. But you want to make sure that you send that letter in via certified mail.
So you're supposed to respond one way or the other.
If you don't respond, you're agreeing.
Oh, alrighty then. Well, I love how the IRS thinks.
Isn't that nice how they worked that out for you?
You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show with your host, Mr. Darrin T. Mish, and I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. We have Pat George back there on the board doing a great job. Thank you to the caller, Alice. We appreciate you listening to the show. When we come back, we're going to continue on with our tips, what to do if you get a letter from the IRS. And if you've gotten a letter from the IRS and you got a question, now's your chance. You can call Darrin. He's the expert at this topic, and he can answer it right away. 888-404-1010, 888-404-1010. You can also reach Darrin at getirshelp.com. We'll be back in a minute.
Are you suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin T. Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin T. Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com. Because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa.
Never heard that one before.
Yeah, welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am your host, the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have.
Once we got to the chorus, we've heard.
Yes. Welcome back to the show.
See, Pat George is just like a generation, or in your case, perhaps 2 generations older.
Yeah, maybe 3. I don't know.
We have to get back at him when we can because
I think
he's
when I
always
was in high school, she was born.
Yeah? Is that right?
Well, that depends. What year were you in high school?
1973.
Oh, yeah. See, he wasn't even born yet. 3 generations.
I was still wearing short pants. So anyway, moving right along, today's topic is what do you do if you get a letter from the IRS? And so far, I can recap what we said by basically saying, don't panic. Open the envelope, read the letter, and then respond if you need to respond. You think that's a pretty fair recap of what we talked about so far?
I think so. In short.
And, the next point is you really won't need to call the IRS or visit an IRS office for most notices, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? But most of the time...
They probably don't want you there because it costs them more money if they have to have somebody to visit you. But isn't it a long wait anyway if you go there?
Well, right now, the 2 IRS, sort of offices here in the Tampa Bay area, the Tampa and St. Petersburg, both of them are not taking any drop-in, customers, period. It's all by appointment.
So you're not allowed to just go in. You have to make an appointment.
In fact, in Tampa, there's a couple security guards that are armed with, magnometers at the front that test for metal and whatnot. And they won't not even let you in the door unless you have an appointment. So it's interesting. I can remember when the IRS made this big switch. They used to call those IRS
service centers or something like that.
Not really a service center, but it was something along those lines. It was for customer service. And so I can remember when the notice came out. This has probably been about 10 years ago. The IRS said, in the interest of providing better customer service, we're going to eliminate all customer service in walk-in locations nationwide. I mean, that's like Alice in Wonderland, right? So I think that most people,
We, on the real estate side, like we have seen times where the returns actually have to be stamped by the IRS because maybe they just filed them or something.
that's an exception.
Yeah, and they do. Well, I got to tell you, we've had customers that go in and they're like, nope, sorry, can't help you. Got to make an appointment. And then like what happens is they usually start crying or breaking down, and then somebody helps them.
See, I had to do that back in June for my 2015 tax return, and at least I knew the verbiage, right? So I knew I didn't have an appointment. Oh, and I brought my kids as I wanted to show them what the IRS was like. And I think the kids actually helped because we walked up and we told them what we needed to do and why we needed to do it. And they were very cordial and they were really nice, and they let us go ahead and file the return. But I can see how if you don't know, sort of what your rights are and don't sort of know how to tell them what you need and to be assertive about it, I can see them turning you away because they just think that you're just,
a crazy person,
or trying to do, to get service without having an appointment like they need, so.
But some of those things are very time sensitive. Like if you're in the middle of a real estate transaction where you're getting a loan, that's going to be time sensitive.
Yeah, for sure. Back to the notices, though, if you do have to call the IRS for some reason, there's going to be a toll-free number in the upper right-hand corner typically that tells you where to call. Now, I want to caution people that are listening about this because if you're somebody who would probably be a good client for me, somebody who hasn't filed tax returns in years or owes large amounts of money, say more than you can afford to write a check for, you may not want to call the IRS because, in my opinion, what it does is it sets the collection clock running. In other words, the normal course of how long things would take might have been longer had you not called, because typically when you call, if you have a large amount that you owe to the IRS and you can't afford to pay them, they're going to give you either a 30 or 60 day deadline, and then you're going to have to respond. And if you don't respond within that time parameter, then the IRS collection machine is going to go into like high gear, and it's going to get worse and worse. So
you actually may ramp it up for yourself.
Yeah, and I had a client come in just this week that had done that. They had kind of called because they thought that was the right thing to do. And what they did is they just kind of set the whole thing on fire, and now it's going a lot faster than we would like it to go.
Why am I not surprised by that at all?
Well, not only that, it's really hard to get through to the IRS right now. On average, I would say your hold times are an hour plus. And then sometimes, this is really annoying, especially when you do this for a living, you'll be on hold for over an hour, and then a recording, and listen to really bad music, by the way, and that they haven't changed in like 20 years. But occasionally what will happen is you'll be on hold for an hour plus, and you'll hear a new message. It says something like, due to call volume, call back tomorrow, click.
So you hold for an hour and then they just hang up on you. That's lovely.
Is that because of manpower, or they're so busy?
I think it is a manpower issue, and Congress keeps getting mad at the IRS because of various things that are probably deserving, and so they're cutting their funding, which is a lot, and actually with the Obamacare, the healthcare mandates and all those things, Congress keeps throwing more and more responsibilities on the IRS with less and less money and less manpower, and so yeah, of course, and the problem,
like the Obamacare, you have to have insurance, or we're going to fine you.
Yeah, one of the things that's short-sighted about what Congress does, and I think Congress has some fair reasons to be upset with the IRS with regard to the lowest learner stuff and whatnot, but it's really short-sighted because the IRS is the government agency that brings in revenue. So if you want to decrease the deficit, and decrease the debt, then I think it makes sense to give the IRS at least enough money to do their core, functions.
It's probably good for the taxpayers though, because they're not nitpicking every little thing.
Could be. I know that audits are down, so that's probably good for taxpayers, but if you're the one that's kind of trying to budget for the country, which nobody does anymore, by the way, but Congress doesn't do it. The president, sends like a fairy tale budget to the Congress.
We do, but our government doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Our government just kind of operates on an open checkbook with
just print more money.
Yeah, with a unlimited credit line on their credit card. But if you were the one that was trying to budget or pay for governmental functions, you would think that you'd want to give enough money to the people who collect it to make it happen.
One of the things, on this list, you have number 8. I'm looking at this. Always keep copies of the notices you receive with other tax records. Why would you need to keep copies of the notices? Aren't they like redundant and duplicates of the same thing?
Okay, so sometimes they are duplicates. So if you're married and you file a joint return, one's going to come to the husband and one's going to come to the wife.
Same address.
So I'm
right?
not telling you to keep both of those. But I'm trying to tell you to keep all of the notice sequentially so that you have them in case you do need help and you want to go to a professional. It's going to help us understand where you are in the process.
So at least open the envelope and put it in a pile.
Yeah, what a lot of people do, well, I've already said what a lot of people do is they just come in with the unopened notices. That's better than throwing them out, or God forbid, getting a little certified notice in your mailbox and you know it's from the IRS because it says it is. And what most people do is they just blow it off and they never go get it because they think, well, if I didn't get it, then they can't possibly do anything bad to me. Wrong. You know, the IRS just has to send the correspondence to your last known address. And if you don't go pick it up, then it's no harm, no foul to them. They don't really care. So if you do.
So what if they're on vacation? We're talking about that, right? Like what happens if you're on vacation, they try to send it and you're not there?
Well, I think typically that the post office is going to make 3 attempts over the course of about, I don't know, how long is that? Maybe a week?
But if you're on vacation,
You're right.
they're going to come 3 times in that week.
You're right. That could happen. And if it does, then that's really unfortunate.
So they're probably never going to find you two.
I don't know. I'm calling Darrin if I get any letters. That's all I know.
I think Pat might be trying to say we're always on vacation.
No.
Absolutely not. We're here every Thursday morning. And if we're not, typically, we're doing a recorded show, right?
Yeah.
And I got to hand it to you. When you aren't, you just don't play, repeat. You do a brand new show, which is very admirable.
Which a lot of people from Night Here, they do air reruns. They do.
There are reruns, yes. They'll just say, you can run a rerun, but you guys don't do that.
What are you guys giving away all the radio secrets here? We're not supposed to talk about reruns.
We don't.
You know what they are?
Those are reruns.
Those are best of shows if you have to
You
run
don't
it.
even play best of. You do first of.
We do. Yes, we do.
We sure try. But sometimes, people get sick and things, people get stuck on bridges and things like that.
That was only once.
No,
Give me a break.
Just one people 2 times.
Exactly.
Come on now.
There was a different time on another station that we don't talk about that much. And it was when I first started doing the show. And I'm going to admit it because it takes a man to admit this. I was scared. But I was doing it. And she called in and she was my lifeline. She was like my phone a friend. And she helped me out. She's better on the phone than I am live. So.
What? What is that supposed to mean?
Well, it means
I know
you're
it's a
on the phone
compliment,
all
but
day long, so you got lots of experience on the phone.
yes,
I mean, when you can't be here live in the studio and you phone in, that you're very, very good.
I don't know if I told you this, but like my very first show here at Money Talk on Fridays, I was late.
Well, of course you were,
My
because that's
very
your
first
pattern.
show. Well, I was used to afternoon radio, not morning rush hour traffic.
It's funny you say that. We've had probably a handful of new first-time shows, and a good portion of them, they're always late on the first show.
See, you can't judge the traffic, especially if you're not used to driving in it. Like if I'm going to get up and drive 5 days a week, it's like a job to come here in the morning because it takes me an hour and a half to get here.
That's true.
But Charlie filled it. He jumped right in and I was on the phone and it was great.
Charlie's a pro. That's why. He's the kind of guy that just makes things happen. Charlie's the station manager here at 1010.
I tell you, in about 15 minutes, he had my guess. I think he had all the interview questions lined up and he was ready to roll with it.
Well, Marconi's assistant was Charlie, so who invented radio.
I see. Now it's that 4 generations. Is that what you're saying?
Okay.
4.
I'm just playing.
So we can be sure that Charlie will once again meet us at the studio door on the way out today. After those
we love Charlie.
compliments.
We're teasing Charlie, but we love him. We really do.
For sure.
So number 9 is be alert for tax scams.
The IRS sends letters and notices by mail. The IRS does not contact people by email or social media or really make first contacts by the telephone. Did you know that? So what's going around now, and it's been going around for quite a while, is typically you will get a voicemail or sometimes a live call from somebody typically with an East Indian accent. We're not making any kind of stereotypes here. It's just these scams seem to originate.
You and Heather have actually received these.
Yeah, these calls tend to originate in India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. And what they're doing is they're basically trying to scare people into giving them their personal information, or in other cases, trying to get them, scare taxpayers to actually give them money. We had a client before we were representing her who actually gave somebody on one of these phone scams, I want to say $36,000 in iTunes gift certificates or gift cards.
That just sounds off.
And it makes you want to smack your head, because since when did the IRS want to get paid in iTunes gift cards? But it was really sad because she was a victim of that crime, and it was unrecoverable because the money left the country.
Gone. Last little tip, number 10, is for more information, visit irs.gov.
Or you can visit our website at getirshelp.com. We've tried to do videos about every single notice that there is. If you happen to find, some notice or get some notice where I haven't done a video, I'd appreciate it if you let me know, and I'll do a video perfectly explaining, well, at least I'll attempt to perfectly explain what to do if you get such a letter.
So getirshelp.com. You can also reach Darrin at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 88-GET-MISH, 88-GET-MISH, or you can visit our website at getirshelp.com.
How does MISH translate? 888-GET-MISH?
It's 438-6474.
All right. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We'll be back in just a moment. We do have some questions from listeners, and we'll take those in just a minute.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about. Well, the names have all changed.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. That's a blast from the past. That's Welcome Back Cotter, is it not?
Yes, it is.
So,
Welcome back from your vacation.
Well, you got to turn the welcome back part on. That's like the highlight of the show. Taking a long time to get to that part.
Tease him a lot. I like all this.
There you go.
This was the show that actually launched John Travolta. Do you remember his character?
Oh, yes, I remember John Travolta.
He'd say-
I was in love with him when I was a kid.
The teacher would ask him a question, and he'd say, what? Where?
I don't
What?
remember that. But I remember John Travolta and Nicolas Cage, two of my favorite actors.
Yeah, and I think he was on Welcome Back Cotter right before Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, yes.
Right?
I was a
the
kid
disco,
when that show was
the
on, but I
disco
do
movie.
remember it.
And then, well, you got all your inspiration, Urban Cowboy.
So some of the questions that we have, and we really appreciate your questions. We appreciate you listening to the show. If you have any, you can send them to Darrin directly at, he's on Twitter at Darrin_Mish. You can call in or you can email him.
You can email him, contact us at getirshelp.com, or you can visit us on Facebook on the IRS Solution Attorney new fan page.
And we'll take those questions a lot of times and bring them to the air. So Jason wants to know, if I file electronically, what do I do with my W-2 forms? I think he means like, what do he physically do tangibly with the paper?
Yeah, because back in the day, right, when we would form, you're working for a restaurant or whatever, and you did your 1040 EZ, or really any 1040, you would go ahead and mail your W-2s in with your 1040. It's kind of hardwired in our DNA as Americans. If we've, filed returns for 20 years or whatever, that's what you do, right? Well, not when you e-file, because the truth of the matter is the IRS already has copies of those W-2s. And
So they don't need the paper.
I know this because I get the W-2s from the IRS for my non-filing clients all the time. So it's provided the employer has sent those in to, the IRS and the Social Security Administration, and the IRS
They
can
have.
those. Yeah.
And they did, I'm sure of it.
Typically, because if they didn't, they're going to have their own problems. So.
Okay, so David wants to know, I retired last year and started receiving Social Security payments. Do I have to pay taxes on my Social Security benefits? Very good question.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good question. The answer is, It depends.
know.
Of course it depends. Of course it depends. If Social Security benefits are your, Social Security retirement is your only source of income, then no, you're not going to have to pay taxes. But there are some rules here, and I'm going to go ahead and tell them to you right now. You have to pay taxes on your benefits if you file a federal tax return as an individual and your combined income exceeds $25,000. So your combined income would be your Social Security and other. Okay? So if it exceeds $25,000, then your Social Security benefits are going to start to become taxable. At no time will you have to pay taxes on more than 85% of your Social Security benefits.
I can't even understand why they would tax retired people.
I'll tell you in a second historically what happened. And if you're a married couple, then your combined income cannot be more than $32,000. So I actually have somebody in my family that's on Social Security right now. He could be working, but when he looks at the math, he's like, why would I want to do that? Because then I just have to pay taxes, and it's a disincentive for him to be out there as an older retired person out there generating income, contributing to the economy and whatnot. He looks at the math and he says, well, I got to pay more taxes than it's worth, so I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to go fishing every day. So historically what happened is there was a president by the name of Clinton who decided that it would be really cool to go ahead and tax the rich by taxing, people's Social Security benefits if it exceeded some amount of money. And I don't know about you, but when I look at $25,000 as an individual or $32,000 as a couple,
You'd be lucky to pay a housing payment on that.
I don't think that, qualifies as somebody who's rich. So it's really unfair because all of us are coerced. We're forced to pay into this, this system. And then to get back the money that we've paid in, if we are successful, then we have to pay tax on it. It just doesn't seem fair to me. It doesn't make sense, but it is the way it is.
That's what we were waiting for, the train wreck of the week.
It's about that time for the IRS train wreck of the week. This is the segment of the show where I talk about somebody who came into the office as something of a train wreck. They had a disastrous situation, and there's always a happy ending. So in this show, this particular show, it's going to be a little bit different. I don't think I've ever really talked about this situation. There's a statute of limitations for the collection of tax, and it runs 10 years from the assessment of the tax. And you can think of the assessment of the tax either when you file a tax return with a balance due or when the IRS just files a tax return for you, and that's called a substitute for return. In this particular case, this individual was a real estate investor and had sold 3 houses, as I recall, and never filed tax returns. And so the IRS eventually filed what are known as substitute for returns for her, and they came up with a tax bill over 2 tax years of $116,955.91. Now, keep in mind, these substitute for returns were fiction, okay? Because what they did when they prepared the return is they just added up the sale price of the house as if she got the houses for free, which she didn't happen, obviously. And they just multiplied by the tax rate and came out with this giant bill. And so when she came into the office and kind of told me about the scenario and told me about what tax years they were, I said, well, why don't we go ahead and just get a power of attorney for you and take a nice, discreet, electronic look at your transcripts so we can see, well, maybe the statute of limitations is coming close.
Can the IRS see that, or does that kind of fall off the radar?
I think they can see it. I mean, there's a record that I made that inquiry, but there's probably millions of those inquiries a day. So it doesn't trigger anything in particular. It's not going to trigger collection action, for example. I've been doing this for many years, and I've never seen it trigger collection action. So when we went ahead and got those transcripts, I was able to identify that the statute of limitations on at least these 2 years was going to expire in a few months. So the worst thing you could do, circling back to the first and second segment of the show, the worst thing you could do is call them. At that point, what do you think is going to happen if you call them? Hey, I owe you like over $100,000. And
like you said, the fire will start.
The statute of limitations is about to blow. What do you say? That would be a really bad idea. And so what we did is we just kind of laid low. We just took no action, and then eventually, at least on those 2 years, the statute of limitations expired. Now, there's sort of an interesting angle on this case. So that was over almost $117,000 that she just doesn't have to pay.
And it was how old? 7 years old?
It was over 10 years old.
Okay, 10 years old.
And it was actually for tax year 2001 and 2002. But remember, when they prepare a substitute for return, it usually takes them a while to get there. And so that's why in 2016 we're still here dealing with this. But there's about another $300,000 on a little bit later tax year, and it's just got a few more months to go. So it looks like she's going to get out of that as well.
So she didn't actually pay anything to settle it. You just kind of followed the rules and were able to fly under the radar and avoid it.
Yeah, you just follow the rules. You got to know what the law is. You got to know what to do in these situations. And the worst thing you could have done in that particular situation is call the IRS and say, hey.
Sounds to me like you're worth every penny you're paid. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Thanks so much for joining us today for this week.
We're out.
I'll be on vacation next week.